Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome
We're ready
to
to
the January Library Board of Trustees meeting. I'm Jim Hanley, the board president. We normally do introduce ourselves alphabetically. I'm going to go out of sequence for this meeting to introduce our newest member, John Walters. And John, if you just, again, give a little highlight of your background. I think you're muted.
Yeah, he's been muted. I'm.
All right, how about now?
There you go. Excellent.
Okay. All right. History major in college, 4 years of military service with the Army, both in Europe and Vietnam. Trade Association management in Washington, about 10.5 years. 16 years of college fundraising, followed by a 20-year career with the financial services firm Edward Jones. And I am now in the third year of my 4-year retirement program.
Thank you, John. So we continue with the rest and do it alphabetically. Carolyn, you're first.
Sorry.
There you go.
Michael is first, I believe.
I thought maybe we were going by first name. We'll make it work. Good morning. My name is Michael Dunn. I work at St. Mary's College as the Assistant Vice President of Equity and Inclusion. Great to be here today.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Guy. I'm Vice President of.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Guy, Treasurer.
Morning, I'm Tressa Sitlak, a member of the board.
Janice, you're muted. I'm trying to unmute you. Janice, you're muted, so you need to unmute yourself somehow here.
I think you have to unmute her call-in.
I've done that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. Excellent.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi went out.
All right, go ahead, Janice, and introduce yourself.
Okay, this is Janet Wallflower. And I've been a member of the board going almost 8 years. This is my last year. And I'm from the county, born and raised in St. Mary's County, educated here in the county, and worked on my master's degree using the St. Mary's County Public Library.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to try to switch Wi-Fi, but and John, normally our meetings go much smoother than this to start. I'd like to also take the opportunity to again acknowledge and thank Beth Roth, who recently left the board after completing her first term in this December. She's highly missed. Okay, so we do have a quorum. And so the first item is the approval of the November minutes. As you recall, we didn't meet in December, so obviously we're reverting back to the prior month. So hopefully you've had a chance to review the minutes. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to accept the minutes, and I'll need a second.
I second.
Carolyn, and all in favor, just indicate by voice. All indicate, say aye.
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 Motion carried. The second item on our agenda, of course, is the EAL, the reports of expenditures. So I'm going to go ahead and make the motion, and I'll get a second for that. Okay, Carolyn, thank you. Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, I just, there's a few I saw on there that, but just the main one, we had a bill.com. That's I don't recall seeing that expense before.
Okay, Jim, what happened was when the COVID started to rise in St. Mary's County, and I didn't know if they were going to close us or what was going to do, we set up bill.com that allows me to automatically, from QuickBooks, have bill.com send checks out so that I didn't have to come in the office to cut checks and hunt down Michael and have him sign.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor of approving the EALs, indicate again, we'll do it by voice, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Sandy, you're up.
All right, the treasurer's report, month cover, and John Ritter educates the trust managed trust account and checking account. For all checking account, have not used that here. I have. The investment accounts that I'm going to talk about, the original tax help fund for active life for development and stock called pay life. So correct that are I think they're large bond accounts that are and plus a bit more help. So our December report, our checking account, the open balance, November 12th, so good cost controls, and the balance 12/28. For the Vanguard investment account on November 12th, the original account value $75,597. Share price $10.09. Our shares $7,777. Yield $10. The account value $7,000. Share price $7. Shares $7,456. A dividend in the amount of $1. That account $1,000. Share price positive. Rudolph account on November 12th, $1,000. Share price $1.07. $1,078. And value $1,000. Share price $1,745. A dividend of $30.13 paid December 3rd, bringing total dividend about $1.10. Gold price. Jim, want to approve them one by one?
Yeah, one by one.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make the motion to accept the treasurer's report as just read and heard. I'll make the motion, so I need a second. Okay, Carolyn, thank you. Okay, all in favor of accepting the treasurer's report indicate by saying aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Okay, yes, Andy, let's go with the second part.
Okay. Our January report runs January 7th. The checking account, as I mentioned, don't count things. Open balance at $12,710. The current balance $7,700. Vanguard investment account, original value $12,800. There were no deposit withdrawals. Share price $10.07. Shares of 1,456, yield 0.5%. On January 7th, the value $7,075 per share price $10.75. Shares $7,095. Dividend account $100.07 paid. Total calendar year 20 that account $1,500. Food offside and the share price up cents for a yield. Food offside, the account value of $8,000, $809.07. Share price $10.07. 1,075 sold. On 7th value was $12. Share price $10.75. Total $1,009. Shares dividend $1 per pound. $5 again. That's that.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to accept and get a second. Okay, Justin, thank you. Okay, all in favor of accepting the treasurer's report, indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries.
And Jim, one more thing. Just in the documents that were posted and sent out,
Yeah.
not the budget request that out of the budget that was developed for the different year. We'll have that. There's nothing to discuss, but
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Sandy, if that was just for information, so you answered my question. Okay. The next item again is me. It's the Smirla report. We didn't meet. Similar to what we did here, we did not meet in December, and because of the change in our schedule, we're not actually meeting until tomorrow. So we really haven't met since the last time I indicated. I will mention something about Smirla later on in the discussions, but right now, really nothing to report. So, Michael, I'm going to pass it over to you. Just so you know, I'm going to drop out, Michael, and try to come back in. I'm having more problems here, but the whole rest of this is really yours anyway.
All right, thank you, Jim. Begin with celebrations, and we have one significant anniversary this month. That's Robert Offer, who is a security guard at Lexington Park. Robert, congratulations on 5 years, and thank you so much for your service to the library. We look forward to you being with us many more years. We have one hip hip hooray, and John, these are staff members who have done something sort of above and beyond the call, and the board commends them specifically for their services. What a hip hip hooray is. I understand that you're new to all this, so if as we go along you have any questions, please stop me and say, what are you doing now? Our hip hip hooray this month is for Ann Alvey, who is a assistant manager at the Leonardtown branch, and she stepped in as the interim branch manager basically for 3 months at the end of last year when Mary Lee Russell retired. And so for doing an outstanding job managing employee schedules, coordinating efforts to finish some uncompleted project capital work, helping with pandemic-related transitions in policy and practice, and keeping morale high, we commend Ann Alvey for excellent work in a most challenging time, and I'll be signing for the board on that one. Thank you, Ann, for for really filling in and doing just a fantastic job. We do have a new Leonardtown manager, and that is Amy Dickinson, and she is here. So Amy, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, here at Leonardtown, I've been at, I was Florida, where I was so I so I did very branch like world of
Do you have any questions for Amy that you'd like to ask anybody?
Welcome aboard.
All right, Amy, thank you so much.
We're very glad to see you and looking forward to great.
Yeah. All right, moving on then. Informational, I've got a couple of new items that have appeared since the agenda was formulated. The first is that those of you who have been in the Leonardtown Library, we did have an unfortunate water pipe leak last year, and it did spoil some carpet squares. It looks like those carpet squares are scheduled to start being replaced in about mid-February. So we will be looking much better again. There is still some final work to be completed, just bringing little things to a close, and we're working with the county to try to get that building completely finished as soon as we possibly can. Second update is that the electrical vehicle charging station at Leonardtown was commissioned on Friday. So it was installed last year, but it was finally activated this past Friday. So if you've got an electric vehicle, those of you out there in the public, this is the first one in the county. Please come on over to the Leonardtown Library. The Wi-Fi has been extended, so you can look at Wi-Fi in your car as you charge it, or if you just want to charge and come in and use the computer in the library, please come on out. And the one at the Charlotte Hall Library is going to be installed next. There's going to be one at downtown Leonardtown in the interim, but we are early on in the process of putting the electrical vehicle charging stations in. Thank you so much to SMECO and the county for supporting that effort. If I go along, please stop me if you've got any questions. Next, we're going to take a look at the budget so far, about halfway through the year. In fact, 52% of the year completed, and we provided that document. Those of you who are in the public who are wanting to see it, you can look at it on board docs and see these documents. They are public record. Or you can email me with questions about them. With 52% of the year elapsed, we're doing pretty well. We've got 44% of the budget spent. And the really no big problem areas. Looking at it a little bit ahead on the telephone service, we've changed telephone services so at Leonardtown, so that's a bit more than we were anticipating it was going to be. The Lexington Park water, sewage, and trash is up a little bit. But other than that, we're pretty much within tolerance on just about all of our budget lines, none really looking problematic here. You know, in some of them we pay ahead of time, so it looks like we've spent a lot, but that's really spending for the year in many of those cases. So for example, insurance, the ebook grant, 89% spent, but we've, actually, there's a little bit more left there. I wonder if we've got an expense from the prior grant factored into that, because the prior grant actually ran through September, so I'll get that figure fixed. Basically, No, that's about right. So we're looking good in terms of the budget. Do we have any questions about any of the budget lines or any of the expenses?
I have one if I may.
Sure, please.
Okay. Sandy, did I understand during your presentation that it's strictly the income off these two funds that is being utilized budget-wise?
Yes. No, wait, John, I think.
Go ahead, Phyllis.
I think you're confusing. The budget that Michael was just talking about is the fund we get from the county.
Yeah, it's also
not what Sandy
that's
had
the
presented.
library budget, and what Sandy was presenting on was in fact the board budget. The board has a fund.
Okay, guess I get that.
And there had been donations board over many, many years. Several boards prior to the one I'm now had decided to invest it. The original has $5,000 past at all time. Primarily fund, but go over a little bit here, be able to support programs at a certain level.
So, what are the investments in the two categories? Are they the same investments?
They're a little bit different. I didn't set them up, but they're both Vanguard accounts. They're different. They're different investments. Because one was Memorial. The share price is always the same. So
Would you mind, at your convenience, sending me the ticker symbols for those?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, before you move on, the volume coming out of you is much lower than, for example, John and Sandy just now. So I don't know if others are having difficulty hearing you, or it's just my computer, but at least to me, it's coming across as very low volume.
I will move closer to the mic. And I hope that's better. So if no other questions about the budget, we'll look at the second quarter statistics. A reminder that St. Mary's County Library has been largely shuttered due to the COVID pandemic since the start of this fiscal year on July 1. We had a limited period when our stacks were open, and then with the resurgence of the pandemic, we're now only open for computer use in the library. So not surprisingly, our statistics are going to be substantially down, with the one bright spot being the digital use, and we are seeing, not surprisingly, substantial increases over prior years in our digital use, since that is still available. So for the quarter, our overdrive use up 44%, and for the year, 44%. Hoopla up 30% on the quarter and 28% on the year. RB Digital, which we split statistics with other libraries on that one, and it's not really our specific use, up on the year. So while our circulation of physical materials, not surprisingly, although we are maintaining our curbside service, and when our customers come to the library, we will give them book bundles. There's about 15 items that we'll check out for them. It might be a genre. Oh, I like cozy mysteries. We'll try to find something for you. I like action DVDs. We'll try to find something for you. Check them out on your account and let you take those home. Not surprisingly, physical items, the circulation is down, both because of the not being able to come in the library as well, relying on curbside service, people not traveling or being out as much.
Michael, can I interject for a moment?
Sure.
I just want to say I use that service of asking the librarian staff to curate some material And I had an incredible experience. I said, I would like some fiction and nonfiction books about contemporary social issues. And they gave me the best bundle of stuff. It was books I'd heard of and hadn't heard of. And I was just incredibly impressed with the materials that were available and the librarian's skill in pulling it together. So kudos to them and thank you so much. And I think this is an incredible service. That's kind of a bright spot amid the pandemic.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. That's great to hear. And we think our staff do a really good job about finding items, and right now it's sort of an advantage. The one advantage we might have is that more of the collection will be sitting on the shelves, so we've got more to pick from. So come on out, public, please take advantage of this service. We're waiting to get great items into your hands. And again, thank you so much, Michael. So, user visits are going to be...
I had a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I have a question.
Yes.
Are you selecting the stats on the programming that the library is doing, the virtual program? There's so many great programs. I was wondering if you're doing that, or did I miss it?
If you look under programs, you'll see some listed for online programs. Yes, we are keeping track of those statistics to the extent that we can.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Any statistics you see there basically are online. We haven't done any in-person programming this fiscal year. We are considering doing some outdoors programming once the weather starts to warm up a little bit. And we have a couple of arrangements with some outside agencies. For example, the Patuxent Naval Air Museum, we're going to be doing an in-person program there coming up. So we are planning on a little bit more in person, and we are very careful about social distancing, about mask wearing, but we're trying to consider having some at our branches as well. And it's a question of where to have it when it's got to be pretty much outside. But we are moving forward on those plans, so look forward to those. If there's no other questions or comments about the statistics, obviously it's not apples to apples this year to last year. We look forward to getting back to full service as the pandemic eases and with any luck the vaccination program succeeds. More on that information later. Just a quick FOLN Foundation update. The Friends of the Library have an online bookstore now, and you may visit that and buy items from them. They continue to sell items that are kind of rare or unusual as well. And they did very generously give us a $20,000 stipend in December, so thank you for the Friends for that. They have plans for a book sale this upcoming spring. We'll see to what extent they're able to do that. Obviously, keeping our fingers crossed that that will be able to happen. Our foundation got some very nice donations in towards the end of the year, and we collected about $25,000 for the foundation this year. And Michael Dunn, thank you for your work with the foundation, moving that forward. So we will be talking a little bit later about how we're going to use some of that funding. I'd like to talk about an exciting program that we have coming up for Black History Month. It's called Black Men in White Coats, and that will be at the end of February. And this is a movie, and it is about the fact that fewer black men are applying for medical school now than in 1967. And so this is a film by a doctor and talking about that and how we might begin to address that concern. And we don't have the exact dates figured out yet, but roughly February 26th, 25th, we'll have a kickoff for that. There'll be 3 days where people will be able to watch the movie virtually. And then on Sunday, roughly the 28th, we'll have a virtual book discussion a movie discussion of that and talk about that. It is time to be something that can be viewed during the virtual college fair that we're working on with the NAACP, which will be the 26th, I believe, that is that date. So Charles County and Calvert County libraries are also interested in partnering with us. In addition to the NAACP, we'll be partnering with the Unified Committee for African American Contributions, Historic Sodderly, on that program, and we hope to have really good attendance. We've arranged for up to 2,000 people to view the video, and so we're looking forward to having that event, and all our partners will be doing their work, sort of promoting this as well. So looking forward to that program coming up, and we've got a lot of other exciting virtual programs on as well. And those programs for the public can be all found on our website. A quick update about the upcoming legislation session. I'm sorry, were there questions about anything related to the programs? Oh, okay, good. There's several legislative things related to libraries coming up in the upcoming session, and two are of particular interest to St. Mary's County. The first one, last year, HB 1000 and Senate Bill 524 were put forward, and they will prohibit the public library from charging a fine to overdue library materials on a minor's library materials. We had already arranged to forgive many children's fines. We simply don't have them on the youngest items for children. This would extend it to teens. Prohibit a public library from charging a replacement fee for minors' overdue library materials until 21 days after the date the materials were due. Requiring a public library to cancel the fee if a minor's overdue materials are returned. We would have done that anyway, incidentally. Requiring the governor to include $7,500,000 for fiscal year 22 and each fiscal year thereafter in the annual operating or capital budget for library capital projects. That amount is currently $5 million, and we got $1.6 million of that to build a new Leonardtown library, for example. What we're hoping is that if this the governor vetoed it. It wasn't an anti-library vote. It was simply that with the pandemic beginning and we were all in lockdown at the time, he decided that no bill that was going to increase Maryland's budget would be passed, and he vetoed this in accordance with that. We are approaching the legislation to override that veto. If so, the money that will come to us, we would like to use to simply eliminate all fines. It would be enough, roughly equivalent to what we get in fines each year, and we would simply not charge fines for any of our library users. Basically, and Calvert's experience with eliminating fines sort of bears this out. When a library eliminates fines, materials come back just as quickly, just as well. It's not like people hang on to them. In fact, they're more likely to come back because people don't get an overdue fine and either have a sense of shame or, frankly, the financial inability to pay that fine. So they bring the materials back as well. It doesn't slow that process down. We get everything back. Libraries are basically built on trust, so we don't have any downsides in that. And if you looked at those budget figures, you see that, not surprisingly, our fines and services so far this year are way below what we anticipated. They were declining over the years in any case, but frankly, we were anticipating about $56,000 in fines coming in, roughly matching last year, and so far about 5,000 have come in. So we're not getting fines at all. This would be very helpful for us if the veto could be overridden at a state level. So we're hopeful that our legislators will agree to that, and we're talking with all our legislators. I've got 2 sessions set up so far, one with Delegate Crosby and one with Delegate Morgan for later this month, and hoping to add Delegate Clark and Senator Bailey as well, just to talk about what's going on in libraries, give them an update on the fact that we've opened our new Leonardtown branch and everything that's going on here in the county. And 3 of the 4 did support this legislation last year, so we'll ask them to consider an override of that to try to provide a little bit more library funding. The other thing that is of concern for us is a bill that's called Public Libraries Electronic Book Licenses Access. And John, this will be somewhat new to you perhaps, but the rest of you have been familiar with, for years we've been talking about how publishers, especially big publishers, make their digital content available for us under difficult terms. And there are some major digital content providers, Amazon, for example, being one of them, who will not let libraries license their content at all. So this bill will call for, if a publisher licenses materials to the public, it has to license them to libraries in Maryland. So, and the good news is that at the end of last year, we found out that Amazon was working with an organization we do quite a bit of work with, the Digital Public Library of America, to make its titles available through that organization, which would allow them to be accessed through the Simply E app, which St. Mary's County Library has been deploying for the whole state. So it looks like Amazon has decided they're going to come on board and work with libraries. But this would have been a publisher last year for Macmillan when they started the year. They were licensing 1 copy of a book to a library and not allowing any more for a 3-month period to try to boost their commercial sales. This would prevent that kind of tactic. Macmillan's not doing that now. When the pandemic started, they said, fine, we're just going to go back to what we were doing. But we have no assurances from any of these publishers in the future that they wouldn't window, is what that's called, content to libraries or prevent libraries from having content. A major audiobook publisher, Blackstone, does not allow some of its titles to be in libraries. And this would make that inappropriate in Maryland. There's similar legislation in Rhode Island and New York. At a federal level, we are doing a little bit of work trying to have the publishers play better with libraries. This does not set a specific dollar amount. It just says reasonable terms. And the reason for that is dictating what is reasonable is more a matter of the publishers talking with libraries. This is not an anti-publisher bill. It's a pro-library bill. We're not trying to do the publishers down. We want to work with them. We will, say what is reasonable with them the best that we can. And currently, a couple of publishers have lowered their prices. We hope that they will consider doing that even as the pandemic eases. But so that's what the sort of nexus of this bill is. Is there any questions about any of these bills?
Any early sense of the potential override on the fees?
I've only talked to one legislator so far, Delegate Crosby, and he has said that he will vote to override. We are working on the other legislators. The bill passed very overwhelmingly, so I'm sure that some of this will have to be what the state funding looks like. I'm sure that no one's eager for an override if that's looking really bad. But so far, I'm hearing that for the state and locally, as we'll discuss a little bit later, that revenues for Maryland are not down as much as were expected. In fact, there's a little bit of a budget surplus that will be expected over this year anyway at the local and state level. So we're hopeful that that this extra funding will come through to libraries. I don't know about the capital grant funding, but the local funding that would allow us to move forward in this way. If the veto override doesn't happen, there's legislation that we have drafted with the firm that represents us to try to get at least the local funding passed for this year, even if it doesn't include the capital funding.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
going back to your discussion about the drop in overdue book fee revenue, if I heard right, you had been running about 56,000 and now it's about 55,000 something.
Yes. When we were closed for the COVID shutdown, of course, we weren't charging fines at all. People couldn't bring their books back and have them checked back in. We started charging fines again in September, but even then, because we've seen such a large decline in our physical material circulation, then people don't have overdues. They don't have books that are overdue at all. So we're not collecting anything like the fines we did in the past. And so if this funding came through to eliminate fines completely, we'd certainly embrace that.
So the shrinkage on that side is not an indication of shrinkage of your inventory because those books have just disappeared from the collection.
No, we still have as many items as ever. It's just that right now they're not being checked out as much as they usually will be. And once the pandemic eases and we go back to our full hours and open the stacks, we're sure that physical circulation will go back up again. That's not, it's. And when people feel more comfortable coming out again, visiting, going where there might be other people around, then library circulation is going to go back up again. But for now,
2 other questions, if I might.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. So the first thing, going back to those car charge stations, did we do any kind of a public relations announcement on that so that the community knows?
SMECO and the county have been publicizing that, and that has appeared in local media, although, and there was a press release about that. I don't know that the library has specifically done that, but I'm happy to get something out now that it's officially actually open, and that just happened this past Friday. So we, I think, can announce that, and in partnership with SMECO, we didn't pay for that. That's all the SMECO initiative.
And the other thing is, given the rave reviews for the library staff putting together a collection of books, do we have anything that allows for client reviews? In other words, could that be posted as a 5-star review?
Yes, we do take customer comments, and people can use our website to comment on our services. And when we present, for example, annually to the county, we include the things that the customers do like. Every other year, we do a customer survey, and this year we did one last spring as part of the strategic planning process. So people are able to comment on and talk about the services that they like, and we do highlight those on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Walder.
Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Marianne. I'm the deputy director. I haven't met you yet. We are also on Google, so somebody could do a review on Google. It's not something we've promoted, but I will talk to our marketing and communications manager about that.
We had just 2 thumbs up reported here at the beginning of this meeting. That ought to be on there.
And we're also on Facebook, so people are able to comment on us that way, and other social media as well. But we can highlight that. And I always enjoy reading the comments. from the public. It's really nice to see because they're almost always universally very favorable. When somebody has a complaint, they tend to take it with me individually, so, or with our staff individually. So it's always good to see the kudos, and people will email in as well. So that's good. I just provided
If I can ask a question, I was going to ask this at the end, but since it sort of keys off of John's question, have there been any reactions, complaints, perhaps questions about the duration between when you order something online and when you get it, primarily in the interlibrary loan aspect? And again, it's my experience that it takes a long time. And compounded by the issue, of the services that we go to online take a long time overall. I guess, have you heard anything, any complaints or any problems?
I'm not really hearing any complaints, but I can tell you why.
People about the duration, the length of time it takes to receive something that we've ordered, primarily through the interlibrary.
Yeah, we're not really hearing a lot of complaints about that. None have been brought to my attention at all. Possibly frontline staff have heard some, but I can give you an explanation, and that is the quarantining process. Basically, if you make an interlibrary loan request, and I assume you're referring to something that's coming here from the Tri-County area, although there's quarantining involved with that too, so much as outside, when something comes through, it will ship probably about the normal time, but when it gets here, we have to quarantine it, and in our case, and in many other library cases, it's for a full week. And so we, and Marianne just commented in the chat, we explain that to people, we're sorry about the delay, but we're trying to ensure your safety. And so things are not arriving as quickly as they normally do. There's other reasons for the slowdown as well, on new materials at least, and that is that it's taking us longer to get materials in, to get them processed. There's a publisher's slowdown in providing materials. So there's any number of reasons why when you initially see something and place a reserve on it, it might take a bit longer. Obviously, once the pandemic situation eases, we'll get back up to speed on that.
Michael, along the lines of I noticed on Friday, Twitter had a every off time. I know that's our program.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
None of it?
I didn't hear any of it. Yes, a little bit closer to the mic. Thank you, just like me.
The county government on their Twitter feed on Friday, they put a link out of video the library like you and had different clips website.
Well, that's good to hear. I think that we work very nicely with the county, and I'm glad to hear that they are promoting our services as well.
Michael, just to go back to my point earlier, then, if it continues to, if there are complaints aren't coming, or if you see the need for it, I've mentioned this to at Sperla that should we develop some sort of communication that explains why things are taking much longer? I'm aware of the things you described, but I don't know if the average customer really is aware of that whole process of delays at Sperla, delays at library, delays even from the library where the book is held. So if you sense it growing, let me know. And I think we need to do something in terms of communication that can come out of Sperla just to provide to all libraries.
All right. As I say, people are making anecdotal comments. Gee, this is taking longer than usual, but we're not really hearing a lot of complaints per se. I think people are very understanding about the situation. I did provide you with a schedule of our trustee meetings for the year, since that John had a question about that. And reminder that next month we're not having it at our usual time because, like this month, the day we would typically meet on was President's Day, so we're a week early next February. But after that, it's just a regular schedule for us. An update about UVC wands and COVID filters, and a little bit of a discussion about the pandemic situation. We received from the CARES grant from the health department about 120 air filtration devices. And those have been installed in the libraries now. They're in staff spaces. Each one covers about 450 square feet. And also in areas that are frequently, what just happened?
They're good at our end.
My video just disappeared. Can everybody hear me still? Oh, there we go. Sorry. They remove COVID particles from the air. Now, we have to be careful when changing the filters, which we haven't had to do yet, and we may not have to do, depending on how quickly the pandemic situation eases, but one has to be careful because it doesn't kill the COVID particles. So there's a complex process for changing out the filters that Jeff knows on our staff. So we'll be careful with that, but it does make the air, less likely to contain COVID particles from people breathing, sneezing, whatever. So that's a nice little upgrade on our safety process. The county has purchased, and we are going to get UVC. So there's, UVA, UVB. UVC is the type of ultraviolet radiation that the atmosphere removes, and it's quite deadly to the COVID germs. One has to use extreme care using these wands. You wear gloves, long sleeves. You don't want to have your skin exposed because it will give you what amounts to a sunburn. You don't want to look into them because they can cause eye burn. But if you wand them over a non-porous surface, they kill the COVID bacteria that's on it. So while surfaces are not the primary mode of communication of COVID, we have been very careful at St. Mary's County Library about sanitizing. So we're going to get some of these. We'll train staff on how to use them, and the county nurse will come out to visit with staff and talk about the various things that one has to be careful about. But they will be used on computer surfaces, which they will not hurt, keyboards, surfaces where people, might stack their books. They will be used, we think, on the outside of books. So a Mylar jacket can hold COVID for quite some time. That will sanitize that. We might be able to go from a 7-day quarantine down to a 5-day quarantine. We won't be able to do every page in a book, so we can't necessarily guarantee this item is COVID free. We'll continue to be cautious about this, but it might allow us to speed up just a little bit in the treatment of the virus or our quarantining process. So far, we've had quite a few staff tested for the virus. They were exposed. So far, knocking on wood here, we've had no positive cases. We continue to be very careful with somebody who might potentially be exposed, and we require a negative test in a certain number of days before coming back. But I'm very happy that so far we've not had any positive cases on staff. we'll talk a little bit about later about leave during COVID. We're starting with the vaccine, and the vaccine is being given here in the county about how we will reopen. And it will obviously depend very much in part upon how quickly we get to something like herd immunity where there's no longer community transmission. Even after you receive the vaccine, it is not 100% guaranteed. It's maybe 95% that you will not get the virus, and people who are giving it are being very frank about that. Just because you have the vaccine doesn't mean you get to stop wearing your mask or stop washing your hands. So we probably, until community transmission stops and the county removes its various restrictions and levels of quarantining, go back to full service. I have emailed the county health executive, Dr. Brewster, and also at a state level, we are trying to have library staff moved up in the queue. I mean, we have people who are on the front line of this. Right now, we're only having computer service, but we will, for many people in the county, that is an essential service. We were open for people coming in and using the stacks and looking at materials, and we'd like to go back to that once the pandemic begins to ease somewhat. But we've asked that employees be moved up to Phase 1B. So I'll read just a little bit of a letter from the Maryland Association of Public Library Administrators to Dennis Schrader, the Acting Secretary of Maryland Department of Health. We request the state include public library workers in Phase 1B of the adopted COVID-19 vaccination plan, along with teachers, daycare providers, and education staff. So we know that the teachers will probably be getting vaccinations possibly later this month here in county, possibly early February, and are hoping to begin having at least limited in-school visits come later in February. We'd like library staff to be included with that. We view ourselves as educators as well. Obviously, there's incredibly high demand for this. We'll see how the county responds. But if we're going to have people on the front lines as well, we'd like our staff to get that protection. So as I say, we'll just have to see how that goes. But we are starting to think about how and when we will reopen. Unfortunately, we can't really promise our full hours and our full services until such time as there's almost no community transmission and COVID is very much in our rearview mirror. But we're eager to get back to full service as soon as we possibly can. Questions about that one? Well, we'll move on to your action items, and the first one is from Jim. It's about SMRLA board membership, and I don't think you've got to vote on this one, but Jim, please.
Yeah, just as background, as many of you may know, the SMRLA board consists of 9 members, 3 from each county. And we recently revised our bylaws that allow a non-county board member to be part of the SMRLA board. And again, the reason why we did that was because the challenge in getting volunteers to serve on the SMRLA board, and also allow us to bring in certain skill sets that may not be present in the SMRLA board currently. So for St. Mary's, I will continue into next year. Now, Beth has agreed to stay on, and again, it's involved. The board years is different than the fiscal year. Basically, board members are selected on the meeting of the corporate meeting. And this year it'll be March. So Beth has agreed to stay on the board for her period of membership, which runs through 2022. But in that capacity, then, since she's no longer on our board, she's that other person who is not part of the current our county board. So we have one other position that Carolyn, who's third member of the county board, will not be continuing. And again, let me explain a little bit of that. Carolyn has served on Berla for extended period. Number two, came back on the board at my request because we needed a balance of input on the selection of a new CEO at Smirla. Thirdly, and again, this is where the difference between when members are introduced or part of the board, Carolyn's term on the county board will end in December of this year, but she can't stay on the Smirla board because we already have one non-county member. I know this gets so confused. Bottom line, we need one more member to serve on the Smirla board. As Michael indicated, I'm not going to ask somebody to stick their hand up now, but I would ask you to consider it. We do need a third member. So it's important to ensure that we have a balance of input. We'll be making some significant decisions at Smirla, some of which have been delayed until we brought someone new on board. So we need to get into some really heavy and important decisions. So it's important, therefore, to have a balance among all the libraries to be part of the decision process. So again, we're going to meet in March. It hasn't been confirmed fully yet, but it's my preference to meet in March, fall back April. So I don't need a decision, bottom line, as to who would like to be on the Smirla board right now. But I ask you to consider it and let me know by February, this place we're set to go, because this board has to approve that third member. And so if not part, I haven't looked at the schedule, our schedule versus Smirla, but we'll have to have at least one meeting of this board to agree to the third member before I go to the Smirla board. So it gets involved. But again, bottom line, I need one more member from the current board, which is the challenge because many of you will come off the board relatively soon, like myself, but Janice, and of course Carolyn, as I mentioned. So it's shrinking in terms of the numbers of people who can't volunteer. But I would encourage you all to think about it, and then let me know if you would like to volunteer for that. Okay, Michael, head over to you.
All right, thank you. Next agenda item is the FFCRA extension. The First Family Coronavirus Act expired December 31st, 2020. It was not renewed. So that allowed employees under certain conditions, specifically if they had a local quarantine or isolation order, if they were advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, if they experienced COVID-19 symptoms and are looking for a diagnosis, if they're caring for an individual who's suffering for COVID, caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed, or experiencing kind of COVID conditions, it allowed 2 weeks of full pay for their normal hours. So if we had a part-time employee, it would be the number of part-time hours that person had. And then another additional 10 weeks for people caring for children whose daycares or schools were closed. I don't know if under the new administration these will be revisited, but for now, officially, my understanding is we don't have to offer them, but I would like to continue to offer these conditions to our employees. It's good for the employees. It is good for the organization, in that people who are potentially exposed to COVID do not feel the pressure, or whose children, they don't have daycare. We'll pay them some funding, and for the extended period, it's 2/3 the pay. It's not the full pay, but we do allow, as much as we possibly can, people under those circumstances to work from at home, to telecommute, and try to make up all their hours. So while I don't know that we need to put this officially into our policies and procedures, but what I'd like you to do is approve continuation of this until such time as there is no community transmission or the end of calendar year 2021, whichever comes first. And if come the end of 2021, and let's hope this is not the case, we're still under COVID conditions, we would extend it again, but by then I'm sure there's going to be other legislation in place if that is the case. But I'd like you to authorize us to continue using the FFCRA guidelines to help our employees during this very difficult time.
Michael, I'll make the motion to accept. I have a few questions, but we'll do that, of course, after we get the second. I made the motion to accept. Anybody? I need somebody to second.
Yeah, second.
Okay, Dennison. The question I have, of course, this legislation is really targeting organizations that are fully operational. Are we? I guess my question is, are all of our employees who don't fit under these definitions working? Because our operations have been reduced.
Yes,
I'm trying to get a feel for how many people that would fall under this category.
We actually have
people who
we have everybody working, and we
don't want to work simply because of the potential exposure or concern.
Yeah, we do have everybody working, and sometimes that work is virtual. For example, the virtual programming, people can put that together, although they will jump on Zoom sessions to coordinate with each other. But everybody is working their full number of hours at this point. So when we grant this is when, as unfortunately has been happened far too frequently, let's say a family member of one of our staff is diagnosed as having COVID. And our staff member is living with that person, and so is potentially exposed, and very likely might, even if they're asymptomatic, become a carrier. So we tell that person, all right, you under these guidelines will be eligible for leave. And if they want to work virtually, we do allow that. That's fine. But many of our tasks cannot be done virtually, and we have people who are not really able to work virtually. For one thing, we have security concerns about, accessing files on a non-library machine. It's just too great a risk of contamination that way of viruses, not of the literal COVID kind, of the computer variety. So not everybody can work from at home. Those people, we have them work as much as they can. They can certainly check email, but we don't want them to be without or to feel pressured. Hey, I've got to have a paycheck. I'm going to come in and not tell people, even if I might have been exposed to the COVID virus. So that's kind of how we've been handling it. And we do have a number of employees, their daycare has not been open. And so what they're doing is they're working with spouses to split child care, and they're coming in, and we're trying to be as flexible as we possibly can with our hours, but some of them simply cannot do all the hours in a week they'd have to. So this covers them under those very difficult circumstances. I hope I've answered your question, but let me know if not.
So you answered my questions. Any other questions?
I have a couple. So did I understand that when those rules were in effect, we actually had people to whom they were applicable?
Well, they'd be applicable to anybody, and basically, for a for-profit industry, the benefit was that you could, for this pay that you were giving, have a tax break. We, of course, are nonprofit. We don't pay taxes, so that doesn't apply to us. But yes, we were required to apply these rules to anybody who worked for us.
So let me rephrase that. Was anybody using the benefit of that legislation?
Yes. We still have people who are using it from last year for childcare, for example. Recently, we just had another employee last week who's obviously can't get into details on this, but it's that same scenario where a family member has been determined to be positive for COVID, and this person is living in the same house. So we tell that person, okay, please do not come in for 2 weeks, show us your negative COVID test, and even though you can't come in and do the work because you're not really eligible or able to do a lot of telecommuting, you're not going to lose money doing that. Obviously, it's good for the overall economy, but it's certainly good for our employees. And yes, we have had people who have used this.
Well, I'm all in favor of the upside attributes, but I'm getting around to asking, can the budget stand it if we have these people continuing and others come across?
Well, so far as you see, looking at our budget for the year, we're not over on anything. Overall, now, if we have COVID conditions for the rest of the fiscal year and we bring in, say, 10,000 on fines, then we're probably going to have to eat into our fund balance. But I don't think that this is a major stressor on the budget. I mean, that's the only area where we're not getting the money we normally do. The county is giving us the money they normally do. The state is giving us the money they normally do. So it's not a huge amount, a huge consideration budget-wise.
No further questions. Thank you.
And just to add to that, I think too, Michael, that looking at the temporary budget, it's really, really low. So obviously we're not bringing in other individuals to fill in for a staff.
Yeah, the substitute budget is way down. There's been sometimes we've had to use substitutes this year, but by and large, we have not had to, just because our regular staff has been enough. But especially at holiday time, there were times when people wanted to take off, and we brought some substitutes in. Or if enough people are staying out, and this is the case at Charlotte Hall, our smallest staff, if you have 2 people there who may have been exposed at a time, suddenly you've got trouble covering all the hours we might want somebody there. So a little bit of substitute, but not much. That will probably be an area where throughout the year, we're probably not going to extend or expend that full budget line.
Any other questions?
I call for the question.
All right, so typically, again, we do a voice vote, but on issues that are a little bit more substantial, I ask for raised hands, but since some of us are not visible, I'm going to go ahead and follow through with a voice vote. The extension of the law at FCRA for library operations. All in favor indicate by voice. Approval?
Aye.
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 Well,
I'm the only one that's not visible. All right. Okay, thank you.
On behalf of the staff, thank you so much. Again, this is a difficult time, and a number of our employees have had to be tested or in a situation where childcare is very difficult. So thank you so much for extending these benefits, and it's been wonderful that Maryland libraries, by and large, have not had to furlough employees. Libraries that depend on other funding streams across the country have, in many cases, really had to, in some cases, lay off staff. My former employer, Columbus Metropolitan Library, which had 800,000 employees for a while, went down to 300. They're back up again now, but it's a difficult situation, obviously, for our whole country, and so thank you for that support. Our next item is additional OPEB funding. John, shortly before you became officially a member of the board, we got a refund on our health insurance last year of $51,000. This is unprecedented, at least in my time here. We've occasionally gotten a little bit back. We've occasionally had to pay out quite a bit more, but at the end of the year, we are insured with the county, and they let us know, all right, your share, what you paid wasn't quite enough. If a lot of people have expensive operations in a year, healthcare expenses for the year might be more. This year, from last fiscal year, we got this big refund. I was a little surprised, but I suspect it's because people, in fact, put off having medical procedures for probably certainly a quarter of the fiscal year and more like a third of the fiscal year because they were all under lockdown. Or maybe less exposure to germs meant fewer other kinds of medical problems, or not being out, there were fewer accidents. Whatever the cause, we got $51,000 back. Now, last fiscal year, we put no money directly into our OPEB. John, OPEB, as I think we talked about during your orientation, is the fund that will, if we can fully fund it, pay each year for the pay-go costs. That is what we're paying on a monthly basis for the health insurance for our retired employees. So while we have, and it's invested in the stock market, which has not surprisingly done pretty well here recently. Last year, this time, it was way down. It's bounced back. So there's about 1.2 million, but in order to fully fund, we have to be closer to 3. And with the stock market fluctuating and probably not over time getting us to that point, I don't know that we'll ever be able to fully fund this. The company that is managing this for us tells us that the county is trying to get to 75% funding. I think even that's an ambitious goal for us, but I think what we've done in the past is we've said, if we had a surplus on any given year, we put money into the OPEB directly to try to build that fund up. This past year, we did not have a budget surplus. We went in the hole according to the audit. I've looked at that figure pretty carefully. We spent $124,000 in Friends money last year, which, because it's given directly to us, looks like we, that made it look like we were a bit farther in the hole than we actually were. I think when I look at everything, we probably came out about even. The disturbing thing is that we didn't get as many materials last year as we had hoped, and that's really not our fault. It was because the publishers were shut down and ordering was shut down at a smaller level, but for several months. But we probably came out close to even, all told, looking at all those many figures. So what I'd like to suggest with this $51,000 is the following: that we put $20,000 directly into OPEB, so that we are trying to build that fund up more, and that we save $31,000. Why save $31,000? Well, last year when the county, or this year, I'm sorry, when the county got its surplus, what it said it was going to do, when we'll be talking about the budget in a second, is hang on to that to cover an increase in healthcare costs for next year. And if we hold on to 31,000, we should be able to handle that kind of an increase. So I'd like you to authorize, however, 20,000 to go directly into the OPEB fund. It's a good idea to try to build it up. Our costs, as we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, on a pay-go, what we pay, monthly to support the healthcare benefits for our retired employees is going up. This year it was 103,000. Next year it's probably going to be 110, 111,000. And if we could fully fund the OPEB, that fund would start to pay all those costs for us. So, as I say, that's kind of what I'd like to do with that money, with your approval. So that's what I'm bringing forward to you now.
The motion is then to utilize a $51,000 refund from a medical account into $20,000 into OPEB and $31,000 to carry over in the event we're not funded sufficiently for costs the following year. So, somebody can second that? Okay, thank you. Sandy, then to prove it. Okay, any questions or comments?
So again, just to clarify for the new guy, if we hold back the excess, portion of the excess, in anticipation of healthcare costs going up, and what we have budgeted for that anyway, is it your best guess that those two things together will account for any kind of a price increase going forward?
Yes, and we'll talk about this more in just 1 minute when we look at the budget itself, but our anticipated rise in health insurance for next year would be about $28,000, and this would be what that money would cover that figure.
So you wind up having about $3,000 on the table that you're not planning on using.
Well, that will depend on what the county funds, but in fact, there's about another about another 7,000 that we'd possibly be out just because of the increase in pay-go. So that 51,000, if we put 20 for, probably would not quite cover the whole thing. You'd have to put something like 17,000 in if you wanted to have it be budget neutral.
Again, what I gathered too, that it's still somewhat of a crapshoot because a lot of elective surgeries have been put off. And as I think Michael indicated too, I think people are being more cautious, and therefore the frequency of flus and other viruses is diminished. And we don't know what's going to happen in the coming year, but it's just an estimate as close as you can get. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor in using the excess amount of cash we described indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay, motion carries. Yeah, motion carries.
Well, thank you very much. It also looks good to our, the people managing the fund when we try to put money into it. So that's good. Well, let's take a look at the county budget proposal, which is due on Friday, and I've presented you with a little bit different. In past years, I've kind of just said, all right, here's the total budget with this, and this, and here's the total budget with this, that, and the other thing. What I wanted to do this year, because I had just so many potential scenarios, is to recommend several things, and it's like kind of like ordering from a menu. You're going to choose the items you want to move forward on. So if you look at the sheet I provided, the county's funding for us this year was $2,966,632. So here's some things that we could consider adding. The first is a Maryland minimum wage increase. We do have people who are not at the new wage, which will come in next January, and this is the amount it will take for the half year that will be in effect to pay those positions. It's $3,900. For this year, that is the only money that the county gave us. The only increase that we asked for last year that we were actually granted. The county is expecting a 1.45% increase in revenue for next fiscal year. $5 to $6 million over what they had thought they might have, or over this year in any case. So that's, I think, needs to factor into what you want to recommend. But I think that this one's a fairly safe ask that we're likely to get approval on this. So and I don't think we need to do these item by item just so much as let me present and then you decide at the end how aggressive you'd like to be in your budget ask. We have increased utilities. The new Leonardtown Library is a little bit more expensive in terms of electricity. And the old building used oil. This new one uses natural gas. It fires the heat, and it also fires that kitchen over in the senior side. But we've got an arrangement worked out where we're paying a certain portion of this. So that looks like it'd be an additional about $26,000 that we want to ask for to be budget neutral there. If you go for the Maryland minimum wage increase, we'd be increasing our budget about 0.13%. If you add these utilities on, we'd be increasing our total budget from the county by about 1%. Our pay-go retirement this year, I looked at the audit figures, it was $103,000 we put into pay-go. That's the money we pay for our portion of the benefits of our retirees. And they get a certain amount depending on how long they've been in the system, how vested they were. The state gets some, we get some, they pay some. So we're looking, currently our budget for that line is $99,000, so we spent $4,000 more for that line. To cover that cost, we'd need another $11,000. And those are all items, obviously I can't predict what the county commissioners are going to give us, but I think those are all very safe asks. I think that we'd be likely to get those, and we certainly need them to be budget neutral. After that, we come to things that are more difficult. Typically in the past, we've asked for a COLA and a merit increase if the county gets one, if the county employees get one. And while it's required some negotiation in the past, when the county employees have gotten that, we have. I don't know that they're getting this year, but what they are is in the third year of a budget adjustment that the library was not included in. We are not county employees, and we did not get this. So last year, the county employees got a merit and a COLA, and we did not as part of the second year of that adjustment. This is the third and final year of it. We did not get this last year, as I say, and employees have received an increase. I would like to ask that we consider asking the county for this and remind them that we were not included in that 3-year budget adjustment, that we too lose employees to Calvert and Charles and elsewhere in the county because we don't have as many full-time employees because we don't pay as well. And I think that that's a good ask. It will, if we do all those things, mean that we're asking to increase our portion of the county budget by 4.79%, which is not a figure I think that the county commissioners are going to like to see, but I still recommend that we ask that. A couple things that I think might be more optional. The first is that $28,237 increase in the health insurance. I think because the county is saying, well, we're going to keep ours to offset that we should not ask for that. I think that we'll just say, fine, we got that $51,000 back. We're going to use that to cover that amount. When the new library was planned, we were told we were going to get 2 FTEs at a then cost of $166,000 a year. So far, we've had 0.5 FTEs. That was the previous fiscal year. This fiscal year, we asked for it, but we were not given that. So we had 0.5, and we said, well, we want this one full-time slot of the 2 we could have had. So please fund that, and they did not fund that. That would be $33,000. I don't think, in light of the budget situation and COVID, with not having as many people in the building, that this is the year to ask for that additional half FTE. So what this would mean would be that we would be looking at having to use our fund balance, and the fund balance figure is going to be about $66,000 with all of that included. Without that, we're probably still looking at dipping into our fund balance by about $40,000. $30,000 but we do that every year, and some years we do dip into our fund balance, some years we don't, but I think that's kind of where we would be if we do these asks. So what I want to know is what you'd like to include in our budget ask from the county. John, for just FYI on the state, that's not something we ask for. We're expected to get a 20-cent, assuming that they don't invalidate the current Maryland law, it's calling for a 20-cent increase for fiscal year 22. 20 cents per capita. Now, it's not really per resident. There's this really complicated formula with 14 factors, including railroad mileage. But from the state, assuming that one bill is, veto is not overridden, which would give us an additional probably $40,000-$50,000, which we'd use to offset all our fines that we've, fine revenue. We'd probably be looking about another $18,000 from the state, just sort of that's what our share would be. I haven't heard of any plans on the part of the state not to give libraries that increase in funding, especially since they may have a little bit more money than they thought they might. So what of these different items would you like to include in our budget request to the county, which I will submit on Friday?
Seems like we can, without approving anything per se, but rather trying to decide what to get to a point of approval. So it's really going to involve sort of a roundtable discussion. And we all may have questions or inputs and so forth, and it'll get us to a point where we can vote on what we'll finally decide on. Let me ask the first question. Michael, I guess on the merit, what is that based upon as a percentage of pay?
It is 2.5%, and that is on the anniversary of employment. So if an employee came aboard in December, then starting December of the fiscal year, they would get an additional 2.5% of their salary. The COLA is 1%, and it is at the start of the fiscal year.
All right, so the merit only is then what, 2.2?
2.5%.
2.5, okay.
I'm sorry, where did the 2.5 come from?
That's just the standard rate that the county uses. when giving a merit increase, it's 2.5%, has basically always been.
And you're putting 479 because there wasn't any in the previous 3 years?
That would be an increase in our budget overall of, hang on 1 second, 2.58% total of our budget. That's just if kind of that increase in revenue is all right. I'm sort of being cumulative there. That would be an increase in our revenue. That would be an increase, as I say, of about 2.58%. So that alone is more than the county's increase expected to be. You could improve asking for only a COLA and not a merit. And as I say, there were just too many scenarios here to break it down and give you the total budget for everything for all these options. But these are what what I'd like you to consider asking for is up to the point where we ask for the merit increase, and not necessarily those things after that.
Link also corrected. I think again, those of us who are maybe more familiar with terminology, it's not truly a merit increase. It's really more of a step increase. In other words, it's not based on individual performance that causes variation in the amount received. Similar to what really is a step increase, which is much more common in union environments than they are
That's absolutely correct.
That's really they all get the same percentage, right, Michael?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. This is not a pay per a merit system. All right, this employee, did this on an annual assessment, and that employee did that on an annual assessment. So I'm going to give this employee, 4%, and that employee nothing. It is a step increase, really, and that's what I typically call it. But apparently, the county calls it a merit increase, so we call it what they call it.
Well, you don't ask, you don't get.
So I think like what you're asking then is to approve all of it through that merit column, which includes naturally minimum increase, utilities, and so forth. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is what I'd like to. That is what I'd like to see you approve us to ask for. It is an aggressive ask, as I say. If you wanted to be, all right, we're going to be conservative. I think you could ask for everything up to the pay-go, and you would not be, we'd be increasing our budget, but it wouldn't be more than what the county increase is expected to be. Where we start getting, I think, a bit more pushback from the county, although this year, again, all they gave us was that minimum wage increase and nothing else. I think that those things are reasonable asks, and because no county employee is officially getting that step increase in that COLA this year, although they are as that part of that 3-year package, I don't think that we're necessarily going to get that, but I think we should ask.
I agree. I think it's important to ask for those things in terms of retaining staff, diversifying staff, and I think we need to make sure that we keep the fires lit to make that.
Let me get your input. Okay, so Sandy, you're in agreement. Carolyn, how about you? John?
I agree as well. I think we should ask for it and keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
Jesse, your input?
Yeah, I agree with Carol.
I agree. Yes, you have to
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to I'll make the motion then that we accept the budget submission as mentioned, which would count to 4.79 increase in our budget proposal. Okay, got a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion carries, Michael. One.
Well, thank you. On behalf of the staff, I thank you for that. Again, I know up front it's an aggressive ask. We may not get it, but I think that this may be a year that we really need to advocate strongly for that. It's a difficult year for the county in terms of budget, I know, but they are forecasting an increase of 5 to 6 million, and since we have really not had much of anything this year, I think it's fair to ask. So let's see what they will say in response to that. And I'm not trying to make this an oppositional thing. I know the county commissioners need to be very careful and they weigh everything, I think, fairly. So let's just see, what they're willing to give us this year and hope for the best. There's one last agenda item, and that is trustee officers for 2021. Jim, that would be you, though.
To go back to that point, though, Michael, I think it's going to really be important how we then push this effort. Naturally, if the county doesn't get an increase, the likelihood that we'll get one is somewhat remote. But yeah, I do think that we need to really use this effort on behalf of our staff to really push this, because they have not had an increase. And you're right, we are losing people to the library. So we really need to make a strong push. And however you think the board can help in that process, and just let us know. Basically, we have, of course, 3 officers: president, vice president, and secretary. I initially asked Beth, prior to her leaving the board, to approach anyone or all board members, if anyone would like to be considered for any one of those 3 roles. And the end result was that that all current board members who are serving in those roles, the president, vice president, and treasurer, have agreed to, as a secretary treasurer, have agreed to stay on for the coming year. And there were no other individuals who expressed interest in any one of the roles. So I'm proposing then, and I'll do it in the form of a motion, that we accept myself, Carolyn Guy as vice president, and myself as president, Carolyn Guy as vice president, and Sandy as the treasurer. I'm making the motion, so second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, John. Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor then of the officers for the board, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. Michael, back to you.
One more thing, and that is, John, in emails related to your orientation, you expressed interest in some signage. Would you like to talk about that?
I'm sorry?
You expressed interest in some signage. Would you like to talk about that?
One word is dropping out. I don't mean to be coy here.
Signs? Signs for the Leonardtown Library?
Oh, signage. Got it. Yes. I think that given that the building itself is a lot more invisible, beautiful building, but it's more invisible than the old one was, I think that we ought to see what it would take to get a blue and white sign, exactly like the blue and white sign with a big white H on it, tells you where you turn to the hospital. There's an icon, or what do you call those things? A stick figure, where we could have something like that, north and southbound, that tells you where to turn into the library highway. Now, I was on the sidelines of an unprecedented angle between the city commissioners and a local church over their electronic sign. I don't think you want to get into that, but I do think a simple black and white, or blue and white sign rather, with a stick figure and an arrow indicating the turn-in point would be appropriate. And in fact, I think that Prince Frederick, where they have that library buried back in off the highway, down inside a nice little shopping center or commercial center is what I have in mind.
John, I believe that has to come from the State Highway Association because 245 is a state highway.
That's what I would think too, although it gets a little finicky because it's within the city boundary.
There's a history of us trying to get these signs. When we built the Lexington Park Library, we tried to get one for that one because it's kind of off the main drag. And I don't know all the details, but it was difficult. We couldn't get one.
Yeah, we tried to get legislation moving forward to allow libraries
it might be time for another push to do that, though.
Yeah, to have libraries be part of it's kind of like tourist signs. So a winery can have one of those. In Virginia, libraries have one of those. Here in Maryland, officially we don't. But I think I don't see any harm in trying to find out if we could get one there. So, and unlike an electronic sign where, basically that would have been the county putting it in if there were any funds left over from the construction budget on the library, which there are not. So we thought about an electronic sign down the road, but I don't think that's going to happen. It would be rather expensive. But I think we can, I'll just try to find out what it might take to get
Frederick Library just as
a sign.
It's got my memory.
Picture of a person reading in an arrow, and it's just out on the highway. I don't know, if they would have, they'd say no, 246 is too heavily congested, or you can't have one, or whatever. But I'll find out. With that, then,
I know it's something you're involved with, and we're involved with, but I curiosity just brought up a question. I guess the town was really opposed to the size of the sign out front of the Leonardtown Library. Where is that now? Is it?
I think that's Prince Frederick. I'd have to drive up there and see if I saw one.
Jim, they haven't done anything with the sign yet. He's talking about the Leonardtown Library sign.
Oh. All right, I'm a little lost now, sorry. You mean the big sign that's there?
Yeah.
What about it?
Oh, I thought there was a dispute where the town felt it was oversized.
Yes, there is a dispute over that. The town says that it is too large. They do not allow signs of more than 32 square feet, which is basically 8 feet by 4 feet. My understanding is that sign will eventually be replaced with a smaller one. And we've kind of we've stayed out of that. I frankly like the current sign. I think it's appropriately signed given how huge the lot is and how big the building is. But that's not something I want to waste any political capital over.
I don't blame you.
Whose fight is that?
That's between the county who put in the sign and the town of Leonardtown. And the town of Leonardtown's restrictions on the size of signs in Leonardtown.
But it's too big and it's going to be replaced. And are we paying for that?
No. Officially, the county owns the buildings and the things on the grounds, so that sign would be their replacement. We own what's inside the buildings. And I believe I sent you that MOU between us and the county as to, everything that we do and they do, but that would not be us replacing that sign, which is why I'm saying I'm kind of just staying out of it.
Okay, so the fight is truly between the county and the town.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to go as far as to call it a fight. Let's call it disagreement over the sign of the size of the sign.
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah, that's not really our affair. So the county budget submission is due this Friday, and Jim, I will have a final draft of you with the recommendations for you to sign off on behalf of the board. On January 14th, I sent you a link to a legislative event. That's really not mandatory attendance. But if you're interested in hearing much more in depth about the different proposals that are related to legislation for libraries, you can zoom into that link. And library staff, I would like you to consider attending that. It'll be right before a management team meeting. There'll be another one later in the month I don't have a link for yet. That will be more an evening meeting. That will be more a celebration and a meeting with legislators rather than just library staff being updated. And that one I think everyone might want to consider going to. And then in late February, we'll have our Black Men in White Coats program. So thank you so much for all your service to the library. It is greatly appreciated.
Hey, any other item from the board itself?
Jim, I didn't get the comment, but I think back to the signage, I think, again, to revisit for all libraries, because that would be a great addition to all libraries if we had that sign. And we're over 100,000 population in St. Mary's County. And so this might be something to go back to the drawing board for. And that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for all attending.
Thank you.
Thank everybody.